The following program is the work of the broadcast students at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. BCIT Magazine features news stories from around the Lower Mainland which were produced over the last week. Responsibility for the content of the show rests completely with the students and their instructors.
Coming up on BCIT Magazine, patio season is back. Long-term COVID effects. And cherry blossoms have arrived. Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Elijah Polson. Here's a look at this week's news. With summer approaching, restaurants and pubs can expect busy patios, but several communities are struggling to balance the needs of their businesses. Now that COVID occupancy restrictions have been lifted, some want to keep the extended patios, and some want to see them go. Our reporter, McKenna O'Neill, gives us a tour.
At Mr. Gold's Gelato Shop in Maple Ridge, you can enjoy icy treats inside or outside. Several so-called pandemic patios were built on parking spaces along 224th Street in 2021.
My patio usually full every day for the summer, during the summertime, because people love to stay outside.
Some businesses with no need for patios aren't so happy, especially when it covers their parking spots.
We love patios. We sit on all the patios during the summer. But in the winter months, they take up parking spots, and downtown Maple Ridge doesn't have a lot of vacant parking spots.
So the City of Maple Ridge has announced a survey for businesses and residents to decide whether the patio stays or goes.
Well, we felt that the city started with an all or nothing survey, like the patios, we either love patios or we hate patios, and that's not where we sit. We love the patios. We just have issues with this extremely large one that takes up parking in the winter and doesn't get used.
I love to keep it, so if I pay some money, it's okay. But the due date is for me is April 15th, so I need to get a situation before that, right?
City Councilman Fred Armstrong stated he believes input from the business community and public are essential for the decision from the council. But for Lee, he says he has a lot to lose.
The patio, we built it around $4,000, but we only used one summer. So there's a loss of cost.
The survey will be open to the public until April 4th. McKenna O'Neill in Maple Ridge for BCIT Magazine.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has intensified in the east despite peace talks in Turkey earlier this week. Meanwhile, the Canadian government is sending additional RCMP members to Ukraine to assist the International Criminal Court. The ICC is investigating possible war crimes committed by Russia. Many patients with COVID-19 recover from their symptoms after contracting the disease. For some people, the long-term effects are lingering. Reporter Hugh Perkich investigates.
Kelly Carmichael, a research analyst at BCIT, caught COVID-19 at the start of the pandemic in 2020 before tests were available. 2 years later, after dealing with several ongoing symptoms, he was finally referred to a post-COVID recovery clinic.
And the doctor referred me to internal medicine. The internal medicine doctor who got my case looked at me and said, "Oh, you have long COVID. I should be treating you through the long COVID clinic." And 2 hours later, I finally got into the long COVID clinic.
Kelly has dealt with symptoms such as brain fog, breathing issues, and physical fatigue. He, like many other long COVID patients, have gone on long-term disability.
In hospital settings, BC's medical staff have seen many cases of long COVID affect its emergency rooms,
as well as its co-workers.
And she continues to have cough, intermittent fever, shortness of breath, and difficulty concentrating. The brain fog that you spoke about it's a real thing for people that experience it.
BC nurses like Stark worry that future relaxing of COVID restrictions could impact their efforts to keep people safe.
When the restrictions lower, I cross my fingers and hope that everything's going to be okay. And as a healthcare professional, that's a really tough place to be in.
And long COVID survivors like Carmichael are hopeful that treatment can help them return to a normal life.
I finally got so sick that I couldn't keep working. I had to go on long-term disability. I'm finally starting to return to work, so I'll work 1 day a week.
For BCIT Magazine in Vancouver, I'm Hugh Perkich.
We're joined now by reporter Hugh Perkich. How many cases of COVID have been reported in BC to date?
Well, Elijah, the number of cases has risen to around 350,000 since the start of the pandemic, and many have recovered without much side effects. Back to you.
Thanks, Hugh. Cherry blossom season is in full bloom, and residents are flocking to nearby parks to take pictures of these blushing flowers. Vancouver's Cherry Blossom Festival is also welcoming back-in-person events this year. Our Flower Power reporter David Natalini has more.
There's a buzz in Burnaby, and it's not just the bees. Hundreds of visitors are taking in the yearly cherry blossom trees blooming around the city.
When walking through Brentwood, it's hard not to stop and snap a picture of these gorgeous blossoms.
We're exchange students and we want to look at the cherry blossoms today and take some pictures.
I'm here to get some pictures and especially to spend some time with my husband because we recently got married.
Festival founder Linda Poole says she was driven to create an event to honor the city's now iconic flower.
I saw that people were not even noticing the beauty of the cherry blossom. I couldn't understand how could anyone miss, this explosion of beauty.
Vancouver's Cherry Blossom Festival has events throughout April, including picnics, a cherry blossom walk, and the Sakura Days Japan Fair.
While the pandemic saw many of the festival's events move online, the guided cherry blossom walk has continued to see a high demand.
Without COVID, we could have 100, 150 people, but because of the restrictions, we had to limit the numbers, and we have people dying to come on a tree talks and walks.
While many residents visit the trees annually, for some, this is the first time they have ever seen a cherry blossom in person.
We recently arrived in Canada, and to be honest, this is my first day seeing flower blossoms because in my country we don't have these beautiful flowers. And we are experiencing the same thing throughout the year.
I remember one fellow from Croatia, he had just arrived, and at the end he felt so welcome to the city and he said, "It is wonderful to meet in my new city someone with flowers in her heart." I mean, that has to be one of the more beautiful things anyone has ever said to me.
As cherry blossoms paint the sky, Burnaby residents remember the old, welcome the new, and look forward to a bright new spring. David Natalini in Burnaby for BCIT Magazine.
Coming up after the break, BCHL playoffs begin. And soccer in the spotlight. Welcome back to BCIT Magazine. One BCHL junior hockey team is preparing to hit the ice for playoffs. This comes after COVID-forced league cancellations for the last 2 years. Reporter Jordan Prentice gives us a score.
Coquitlam Express players are sharpening their skates and their skills for the BC Hockey League playoffs beginning this Friday.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but now we feel better than ever, and we're excited for the playoffs. We think we can beat anyone that comes in here.
COVID forced the league to cancel playoffs for the last 2 years, so some Express players have never experienced a playoff run.
Especially for the younger guys, it's tough because they don't know, they're like, myself included, the grind of a 7-game series, and then 10 days later you're in your next series.
Express head coach Brandon Shaw says the last 2 years have created advantages and disadvantages.
The advantages to it is there's lots of ice time. Guys can work on different skills, different little things that you don't usually get to work on for long extended periods of time. Disadvantages is there's no replacement for games and developing in games in terms of compete and putting yourself up against an opponent and winning a battle.
Shaw says the team knows what they need to work on in order to win.
Things that we want to continue to work on is our defending, being hard to play against so we don't give too much up off the rush, and being hard, taking away secondary chances, and we want to work on our penalty kill.
The Express have won 10 of their last 11 games and are number 1 in the Coastal Division. That record bodes well for the players to prove themselves in the playoffs. Jordan Prentice in Coquitlam for BCIT Magazine.
Canucks fans are breathing a sigh of relief now that the trade deadline has passed. But now the playoff crunch is on. While the Canucks need to win the majority of their 13 remaining regular season games, they're hoping the other teams in the Pacific Division do not do the same. The Canadian men's soccer team has qualified for the World Cup after a decisive victory over Jamaica. Our reporter James Parisi sat down with sportscaster Scott Rintoul to go over what the fans can expect moving forward.
When you saw that Canada made the World Cup, what was your initial reaction? How did you feel when that happened, and maybe where were you?
Perhaps a better question for my daughters as they yelled, "Daddy, you scared us." I was watching at home. My kids were in the house, and I got pretty loud and vibrant when Canada scored that first goal, which I knew would send them through. Ultimately, that was the only one they needed. And then as they continued to pile it on and that reality sank in, I was pretty joyous, as were a lot of other people across this country.
And now going forward, what do you think people around Canada can expect for, let's say, media coverage if they're not necessarily as into soccer, as this is going to be a huge thing for our country?
I think you can look at a couple of other examples. Look at the type of coverage that our Olympics got when 2010 became a reality, and we knew that it was going to be a massive event on our home soil. And though the World Cup won't be hosted here, you just saw funds generated toward that event. You saw media coverage ramp up exponentially. And the way that we viewed our Olympic programs ever since ultimately changed. Look at the way that Christine Sinclair and that women's team over the past 2 decades has led and caused this following that's created an emotional connection with her and that team. And that might be the best example.
Now, as excitement ramps up and we look forward to the World Cup actually starting, there's some big players on Canada's roster. What do you think Canadians can expect as they get to know guys like Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, and others on the team?
Well, we've started to learn a lot about them. And Alphonso Davies, for those who don't know already, is one of the best players at his position in the world, not just in this country, not just in CONCACAF, the region that Canada is qualifying in the world at his position. And he hasn't even playing the last few matches. So that just gives you an idea of where the talent level is at. This is such a coming out party for the individual members of this team, for this team in general. You're going to see profiles on these players all over the place. People will start to learn about where they play. I believe it will grow an affiliation with a number of teams. You saw the number of people who jumped on board Bayern Munich's bandwagon during the pandemic when they saw Alphonso Davies was playing for them, and many have stuck with him. It will cause the same effect, I believe, for a number of Canadian players playing elsewhere. It doesn't mean we're going to convert everybody in this country, but for a lot of people who are going to watch this World Cup, it's the first time they have ever seen the Canadian men's program in a World Cup. That is monumental for soccer in this country.
Soccer fans across the nation are excited to cheer for their home team on the road to Qatar. I hit the turf to see how our community is reacting to the news.
Oh, Canada. Those 2 words roared around BMO Field on Sunday following the Canadian men's soccer team's 4-0 win over Jamaica to clinch a spot in the World Cup for the first time since 1986.
For 36 years, this team's history was filled with false hope, agonizing defeat, and embarrassment of epic proportions. But this week, it was all booted down the field.
The rise to soccer power has picked up many new fans along the way. Kids across Canada will be watching their country on the beautiful game's biggest stage for the first time. It's pushing them to be better on the field.
It's inspirational. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like definitely
Motivational.
It's gonna motivate us to especially want to play hard, do good in our tournament and stuff.
And for those who remember the prior decades, the difference between then and now is clear.
Playing for the country at that time was kind of like, you knew you were playing and you were very proud to play for your country. But, you know, a lot of the dreams and the reality of playing in a major tournament were always very, very tough.
The World Cup kicks off in Qatar in November. While Canada will be an underdog against the globe's top nations, there's belief they can do better than their 1986 appearance.
You know, when you play games in major tournaments, you know, it really comes down to, you know, what kind of culture you have in your change room and the togetherness within the group. And that's something that this team seems like they have and that they've built over the last little bit.
And the hope this team created could cause a spark for generations to come. Elijah Polson in Vancouver for BCIT Magazine. In entertainment news, Jada Pinkett Smith has broken her silence after her husband Will Smith made history at the Oscars Sunday night. Smith slapped Chris Rock on stage and yelled profanities after the comedian made a joke about Smith's wife. Pinkett Smith shared a message on Instagram saying, "This is a season for healing, and I'm here for it." Her post comes a day after Will Smith issued a direct apology to Rock for his actions. If you have any questions regarding the show, you can contact us at bcit-broadcast.com or bcitnews.com. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine. I'm Elijah Polson. We'll see you next week, and don't let those April showers get you down.